संसारदावानललिढलोका त्राणाय कारुण्या घन घन त्वम् प्राप्तस्य कल्याणा गुणार्णवस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् महाप्रभोः कीर्तन नृत्यगीता वादित्रमाद्यान्मनसोरसेन रोमाञ्चकं पाश्रुतरङ्गभाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् श्रीविग्रहाराधन नित्यनाना शृङ्गारतान्मन्दिरमार्जनादौ युक्तस्य भक्तां शनियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसाद स्वाद्वन्न तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्घान् कृत्वैव तृप्तिं भजतः सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना प्रतीक्षणा स्वादनलोलपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् निकुञ्जयूनो रतिकेलिसेथ्यै यायालिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रातिदाक्षातत्तिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् साक्षात् हरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रैरुक्तस्तथा भव्यत एव सद्भिः किन्तु प्रभोः यः प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसाद यस्या प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायंस्तु वंस्तस्य यशस्त्रिसन्ध्यां वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् ध्यायंस्तु वंस्तस्य यशस्त्रिसन्ध्यां वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणारविन्दम् नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Shri Radhe. जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेवा श्रीसुभद्रा जय सुदर्शना जय सीताराम जय सीताराम जय सीताराम जय लक्ष्मण हनुमान जय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव
Divine grace of Vajramina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Iskon Pratishta Vividi Samstha Prachar Vaishnav Sramani Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Maharaj ki jai. Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patita Udhara ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sadguru Swami Prabhu ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ji ki jai. Ananta Kuri Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Prem si kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Param Dayal Shri Nityananda Prabhu ki jai. Jai Pramanama Sankirtane Ka Janaka Prema Purushottama Shri Sachinandan Shri Gauranga Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gaur Hari Mahavranaavatar ki jai. Golokera Pramadhani Nam Sankitan Jaga ki jai. Jogadharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki jai. Prihabhidanga Translate to Book Distribution Seva ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopukutna Radha Kunsam Giriraj Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vraja Bhumrindavan Mathurudam ki jai. A Lordship Shri Radha Nilamadhava ki jai. Shri Maya Purnavadvip Eka Chakradam ki jai. Paramakaruna Shri Gaurnitaya ki jai. Shri Purushottama Ketra Jagannath Puridham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Smaspadra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan ki jai. Jaganga Maya Jamuna Maya ki jai. Tulasi Maharani Vrindi Devi Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Mathura Dharani ki jai. Bhakti Sabra Vigna Vinashana Shingare Bhagavan ki jai. Nitai Gaurari Pramanandi. All glories to the Assembly of God. All glories to the Assembly of God. All glories to the Assembly of God. All glories of Shri Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya Namaste Narasimhaya Praladadahine Hiranyakashipurvakshaha Shilatankanakalaye Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha Yato yato yami tato Narsimha Bahir Narsimha Hridaye Narsimha नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलवरेणकाम् अद्भुतशृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तनुभृङ्गा केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय प्रहलाद महाराज नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल भक्ति विघ्न विनाशक लक्ष्मण नरसिंहदेव भगवान की जय शिरोमणि प्रहलाद महाराज की जय
श्रीवृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय विष्णु भक्ति प्राणे देवे सकवतारे
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Nama. Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Nama. Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Bilasi. Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Bilasi. Jitomaya Sharanaloy Tara Vanshapurna Hoy. Kripa Kori Koro Tare Vrindavanabasi. Moraya Vilas, Vilas Kunjari Ovas. Nayane Heri Bosada Jugala Ruparasi. Eini Vedana Daro Sakir Anugata Koro. Sakir Anugata Koro. Seva Adi Karadi Koro Nichadasi. Dina Krishna Dase Koi Eye Namora Hoy. Krishna Dase Koi Eye Namora. Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadaya Nabasi. Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sadaya Nabasi. Yani Kandi Cha Papani Brahma Hatyati Kani Cha Tani Tani Pranashanti Pradakshina Pade Pade. Brahma Hatyati Kani Cha Tani Tani Pranashanti Pradakshina Pade Pade. Yani Kani Cha Papani Brahma Hatyati Kani Cha Tani Tani Pranashanti Pradakshina Pade Pade. Yani Cha Papani Brahma Hatyati Kani Cha Tani tani pranashanti Yani kani chapa pani brahma tyati kani cha Tani tani pranashanti pradakshina pade pade Brahma tyati kani cha Tani tani pranashanti pradakshina Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani. Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi. Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
Beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Sri Radha and Krishna. Lord, I take shout of you as wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence, pleasure groves of Sri Vrindavan. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful Krishna Radha. I beg you to make me a follower of the damsel of worth. Please. I beg you to make me a follower of the damsel of Christ. Please give me a privilege to post for service and make me your own met servant. This very fallen Lord servant Krishna, please. May I always sing the love of Shri Radha and Golden Shmati Purush Maharaj in the Devi Ki Jai. Jai Purush Maharaj. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikhastakam Ki Jai. Chaito Darpanam Mahajanam Pavamadavam Shri Akari Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivadhanam Svanipadam Punamrita Swadanam Sarvatmasam Param Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Sarvashakti Tatrapita Niyamita Shmaranena Kala Itadusitava Kripaya Bhagavat Mamapi Nadapi Sunichena Tarapi Saishnuna Manina Manadena Kitanya Sadahari Nadhanam Nadhanam Sundarim Kavitam Mangaradam Ishakamaye Mama Janmani Janmani Swari Bhavatar Bhaktar Ahaituki Tvai Ainandini Tanuja Kinkaram Paditam Param Sarai Sadrisham Pichintaya Nayanam Gadada Ashwadharaya Vadanam Gadgada Rudraya Gira Punakarnisitam Vaku Akada Tavanama Gruvena Bhavishyate Yugayutam Nimiche Natachuram Pravachayata Sunayitam Jatsam Govindam Ename Ashli Shava Padaratam Pinastu Mam Adrasham Marmam Atam Atam Karoti Va Yada Tada Vidatu Lampato Matprana Natastu Sakevara Prana Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Rama Ramo Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Ramo Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Rama Ramo Hare Hare Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sistashtami Ki Jai.
Glory to the Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart over the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditioned life with repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully test the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus we have 100 millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, think of oneself Lord and stroll in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause, devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharajananda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, I'm rather falling in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at the lotus feet. Oh my Lord, when my eyes will be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name. When will my voice choke up and will the hairs of my body stand on the end of the recitation of your name? Oh Govinda, feeling your separation, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrent rain, and I feel all vacant in the world, in your absence. I know no wonder Krishna is my Lord, and he should remain so. Even if he surrounds me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me, he is completely free to do anything and everything, which is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kistakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1, blasphemy of devotees who dedicate a life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2, to consider names of demigods and Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3, to disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4, to blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures and pursuance of Vedic version. 5, to consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6, to give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord. 7, to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8, to consider chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritualistic activities. which are often Vedas as fruitive activity, karma kanda. 9, to destroy the faithless person by the glories of holy name. And 10, to not have complete faith in chanting the holy names, and to maintain material attachments, even of understanding so many instructions in this matter. Those who are no friends to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, because of the Lord, they are just like desired trees, they can fulfill the desire of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the
fallen conditioned souls. Vanshakal Sagrajatam Sahaganavakunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Saidvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakanitam Sa Ma Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Itinamini Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Charine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Sarvasatya Distarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Tinamini Shivasavanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhakti Da Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Madhvani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasiddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Shakshadvaragya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambode Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitanandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Vir Baba Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannatayate Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Chuse Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Shri Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dima Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Suratur Pangur Mama Manda Mater Gati Matsarva Swapadam Bhujo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Dvindaranya Kalpadramadaha Shrimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shrimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prestali Bihi Sevyamanam Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsivata Svatasvita Karsan Venuswaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Mishabhanu Stute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Adiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam Chintamini Prakadasatma Sukalpa Vriksha Laksha Vrite Susuravira Vipaliyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasam Brahma Sevyamanam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kvanantam Aravinda Dalayataksam Varhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Koptikamaniya Vishesha Sobam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kala Sattvandamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranay Keli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribanga Lalita Niyata Prakasam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sudurlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayo Ratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chayatum Jagadanda Kotim Yaschakti Rasti Jagadanda Chayayadanta Andanta Rasta Paramanu Chayanta Rastam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusaha Suktaryameva Nikama Pratitaistuvanti Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabis Tabirya Eva Nijarupa Tayakalabi Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhutto Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksadev Davesu Viluskayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Amenatistan Nanavatar Makarod Bhuvanesu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumam Yo Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagananda Koti Ya Koti Swasesu Vasadadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Asesa Bhutam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Hiyasya Jagadanda Satani Suti Satargunya Tad Visayveda Vitayamanam Sattva Volambi Parasatvam Visuddha Sattvam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasu Ya Praninam Pratifulam Sparatam Utetya Lila Yatena Bhuvanani Jaya Jasram Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Golokanamni Nichitamni Tale Chatasya Devi Mahesu Haridama Sute Sutesu Te Te Prabhava Nichaya Vihitaschayena Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Shristi Stati Palaya Sadhava Sakti Reka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Ichhanurupam Apiyasya Chachesta Tesa Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadivikara Visesa Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritagasti Hetu Ya Sambhutam Apitata Samapaiti Karyat Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Deepachareva Hitasantanam Abhyupetya Deepayate Vivita Hetu Samanu Dharma Yastadrikeva Hicha Vishnu Taya Vibhati Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarnanarna Vajale Bhajatisma Yoga Nidram Ananta Jagadanda Saroma Kupa Adhara Saktim Avalambya Param Samurtim Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Nisvasita Kalamatavalamya Jivanti Loma Villaja Jagadandanata Vishnur Mahansahi Yes Circula Visesu Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Basvanya Tasma Sakalesu Nijesu Teja Sriyam Kiyat Prakatayat Apitadvadatra Brahmaya Esa Jagadanda Vidana Karta Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Palava Yugam Vinidaya Kumbha Dvande Pranama Samayesa Ganadi Raja Vignan Vihantam Alamasya Jagatrayasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahiga Ganamambu Marudisascha Kalastatatma Manasiddhi Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Vishanti Amcha Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschaksuresa Savita Sakalagrahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Teja Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Tapapa Nichaya Srutayastapamsi Brahma Dikita Patagava Tayasta Jiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrindra Gopa Matavindra Mahoswa Karma Pandanurupa Falabhaja Namatanoti Karmani Nirdahati Kintu Jabhakti Bhajam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Krodha Kama Sahaja Pranayadi Bhitti Vatsalya Mohar Gaurava Sevya Bhavai Sanchintya Tasya Sadrisim Tanamapurete Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shri Yakanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Durma Bhumis Chintamani Ganamayi Toyam Amritam Kata Ganam Natyam Kamanam Apivam Sipriyasaki Chidanantam Jyoti Param Apitad Aswadyam Apicha Sayatra Shiradi Bihi Shravati Surabhibhyascha Sumahan Nimesar Dakyova Vajatis Nahiyatrapi Samaya Bhaje Swita Dvipam Tamaham Ihagolakam Itiyam Vidantas Te Santakshiti Viralachara Katipahe Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2 Chapter 9 Text 37 and we're just going to read the last paragraph and then go to 38. Unto the devotees who are constantly engaged in the Lord's transcendental loving service, Priti Purvakam, the Lord, out of his causeless mercy upon the devotee, gives direct instructions so that the devotee may make accurate progress on the path returning home back to Godhead. One should not, therefore, try to understand these 4 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam by mental speculation. Rather, by direct perception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is able to know all about his abode, Vaikuntha, as was seen and experienced by Brahmaji. Such Vaikuntha realization is possible by any devotee of the Lord situated in the transcendental position as a result of devotional service. In the Gopala Tapani Upanishad, Shruti, it is said, Gopil Veso me Purusha Purastad Avirbha Bhuva. The Lord appeared before Brahma as a cowboy, that is, as the original personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, Govinda, who was later described by Brahmaji in his Brahma Samhita 5.29. Chintamani Prakara Sadmasu Kalpa Riksha Laksavrite Susurabhira Vipalyantam Lakshmi Sastra Satasam Brahma Sevyamanam Govindamadi Purusam Tamaham Bhajami. Brahmaji desires to worship the original personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, who resides in the topmost Vaikuntha planet, known as Goloka Vrindavana, where he is in a habit of keeping Surabi cows as a cowboy, and where he is served by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune, the gopis, with love and respect. Therefore, Lord Sri Krishna is the original form of the Supreme Lord, Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. This is also clear from the instruction. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is Lord Krishna, and not directly Narayana, or the Purusha avatars, which are subsequent manifestations. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam means consciousness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the sound representation of the Lord as much as the Bhagavad Gita is. Thus, the conclusion is that Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of the Lord, in which the Lord and his abode are perfectly realized. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So the verse says, O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial nor in the final destination. Devastation. Yes. Okay, so up to this point, what does that mean exactly? Well, that was explained in the previous verse. That is, in 6 points. It says, even though one is well versed in all the Vedas and scriptures, if one is not a devotee of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, he is considered to be the lowest of mankind. Now you can ask the question, how is it possible that someone who is well versed in the Vedas and scriptures and is not a devotee of the Supreme Lord, and even though they know the scriptures, they would be considered the lowest of mankind? That means the Naradama. It's because the whole purpose of the Vedic knowledge is to lead one to surrender completely to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to understand why Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even above Narayana. So how can we understand this? Well, we have to hear it from bona fide authorities. And they will also show us where this is proven in the Vedic literature. Then second point, in the Garuda Purana, Brihan, Naradiya Purana, and Padma Purana, the same is repeated. What is the use of Vedic knowledge and penances for one who is devoid of devotional service to the Lord? There are many people like this, many people like this, that know Vedas, or somewhat. Usually they use the interpretation of Sankaracharya in the Saridak Bhashya. So that gives an impersonal explanation of the Vedas. So that means that they don't understand the personality of Godhead. So if you don't understand the personality of Godhead, you won't engage in the devotional service of the Lord. So therefore a person is considered, even though they know Vedas, as Naradama, the lowest of humankind. And point number 3, what is the comparison of thousands of Prajapatis to one devotee of the Lord? It's very rare to meet a genuine devotee of the Lord, because there are very few in the world. And we're fortunate because we have this association through Shruti, through hearing, of Srila Prabhupada. So we have thousands of tapes of Srila Prabhupada speaking. We have all the different books that Prabhupada translated and commented on. And we have even videos of Srila Prabhupada. So therefore, there is no dearth or no lack of associating and hearing from a pure devotee. And anyone who wants to represent Krishna and Prabhupada must be able to repeat what Prabhupada and Krishna has said without any deviation. So that is the art of giving a class. You simply repeat what the Lord has said, and don't add anything or subtract anything. And now, number 4, Sukadeva Goswami said in Bhagavatam 2.4.17 that neither the ascetic nor one who is greatly munificent, meaning gives a lot of charity, nor one who is famous, nor the great philosophers, nor the great occultists, nor anyone else can achieve the desired result without being engaged in the service of the Lord. Well, even though people engage in different rituals and they study different Vedic scriptures and they go on pilgrimages and they may even chant mantras, but none of these people can actually understand devotional, the Krishna consciousness or Krishna, unless they actually engage in devotional service under the guidance of bona fide devotees, Siksha and Diksha Gurus. So they may know all these things, they might accomplish so many things, write many books, but unless they actually engage in devotional service under the scrutiny of bona fide Siksha and Diksha Gurus, they'll never really become genuine devotees. And number 5, even if a place is more glorious than heaven, if there is no glorification of the Lord of Vaikuntha or his pure devotee, it should at once be quitted. So that is what we would say what makes the difference between a genuine temple of Krishna and any Hindu temple. Prabhupada has written in his letters, all Hindu temples in the West are not bona fide. So that's a fact. It's a fact because they're misleading people into karmakanda performances, and most of the Brahmins today have become businessmen. A Brahmin is supposed to be, a real Brahmin is supposed to have a vow of poverty, and even though he may receive huge amount of charity from kings and people, it should be he should distribute it to people in need, and not increase his level of material opulence. Look at the Goswamis. They were all extremely rich men and in very powerful positions. They gave it all up. They gave it all up, and they lived without any house, even though they built nice temples. They didn't live in the temples even after they built them. They continued sleeping under a different tree in Vrindavan every night. But yet they engaged in very intense Krishna Katha, and they also administered to the people. You know, they would settle arguments and then build these big temples. It was not easy because the Muslims were in complete control at that time. They had control of everything, including marble and stone and all these things. But somehow or other, the Goswamis were able to convince them to help them build these different, at least the major temples, the 7 major temples, beginning with the first 3, which is Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Govinda, and Radha Gopinath temples, right? And then there's another 4, but they came later. Those were the first temples that were built. So we see that it's a very rare thing to be in a genuine temple, to be able to come every day to a genuine temple and hear genuine presentation of Vedic knowledge, and also have the great privilege of being engaged in devotional service, which is a direct link to Krishna, right? Then it says, the pure devotee refuses to accept all the 5 different types of liberation in order to be engaged in the service of the Lord. The final conclusion, therefore, is that the glories of the Lord must be always and everywhere proclaimed. One should hear about his glories. One should chant about his glories. And one should always remember his glories, because that is the highest perfectional stage of life. So, when it says, in the verse that we're reading today, O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial nor in the final destination. So what is this conclusion? That is, as it said here, one should hear. The final conclusion, therefore, is that the glories of the Lord must be always and everywhere proclaimed. One should hear about his glories. One should chant about his glories. And one should always remember his glories, because that is the highest perfectional stage of life. As far as fruitive work is concerned, it is limited to an enjoyable body. As far as yoga is concerned, it is limited to the acquirement of mystic power. As far as empiric philosophy is concerned, it is limited to the attainment of transcendental knowledge. And as far as transcendental knowledge is concerned, it is limited to attainment of salvation. Even if they are adopted, there is every chance of discrepancies and discharging of the particular type of functions. But adoption of the transcendental devotional service of the Lord has no limit, nor is there fear of falling down. The process automatically reaches the final stage by the grace of the Lord. In the preliminary stage of devotional service, there is an apparent requisite for knowledge, but in the higher stage, there is no necessity of such knowledge. The best and guaranteed path of progress is therefore engagement in bhakti yoga, pure devotional service. So this is the conclusion that is being mentioned in text 37. O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial nor in the final devastation. Okay, so coming back now to this last paragraph, Brahmaji desires to worship the original personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, who resides in the topmost Vaikuntha planet, known as Goloka Vrindavan, where he is in the habit of keeping Surabhi cows as a cowboy, and where he is served by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune, the gopis, with love and respect. Therefore, Lord Sri Krishna is the original form of the Supreme Lord, Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. This is also clear from this instruction. The Supreme Personality of God is Lord Krishna, and not directly Narayana or the Purusha avatars, which are subsequent manifestations. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam means consciousness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the sound representation of the Lord as much as the Bhagavad Gita is. Thus, the conclusion is that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of the Lord, in which the Lord and his abode are perfectly realized. Well, this process of knowledge, although it says in the higher stages, even knowledge is not required if one has love for Krishna, right? And then the proof of that is that the residents of Goloka Vrindavan, they don't even know Krishna is God. So, therefore, but they have complete love for the Lord. So this is amazing information, amazing information. That doesn't mean we shouldn't cultivate knowledge in this stage. It's necessary to know about Krishna. But in the higher stages, even knowledge is not required. Simply pure love and devotion for the Lord. So it is explained in the Laws of Nature, which are, this is a book of the lectures that Prabhupada gave on the Ishopanishad. And there's a chapter that says, the way of knowing God. The way of knowing God. And there it says, in the Vedic disciplic succession, the spiritual masters always base their statements on what they have heard from the authoritative sources, never on personal experience. Wow, that's a big statement. Never on personal experience. All the scientists, all the philosophers, all the archaeologists, all the pundits, all the politicians, they all talk about personal experience to know things. And here it says, the spiritual masters always base their statements on what they have heard from authoritative sources, never on personal experience. Whoa. So, what does this mean now? Prabhupada writes, trying to understand things by one's own direct experience is the material process of gaining knowledge, technically called pratyaksha, direct perception. Right? The Vedic method is different. It is called shruti, which means to hear from authoritative sources. That is the secret of Vedic understanding. If we understand this one little paragraph here, if we understand this one little paragraph, we will not be duped anymore by all the nonsense that's going on in the world of so-called education. It is not education. It is ajnana. It's ignorance. There's no knowledge coming through this modern so-called teaching of knowledge. It is not knowledge, it's ignorance. And people want to base everything on their personal experience. So they write books about, they write autobiographies. Autobiography of this one, of that one. and most of those autobiographies are useless. Why? Because it's all about, how they succeeded. Like Jeff Bezos will write an autobiography about, how he succeeded. He started in a little garage, and now he has the biggest company in the world, and he's one of the richest men in the world, and he dumped his wife and married this other, met somebody else's wife, and how he's enjoying life, and now he's invested $2 billion in a new company that's going to solve the riddle of death, and all nonsense, all false things, nothing substantial. How to become liberated from the cycle of birth and death, how to develop love for Krishna, nothing, zero. And people will buy his book and read it and get inspired by it. And he'll say, you can do it too. You can also be a big karmi like me, right? And so, how many books are there like that? Hundreds, thousands of books like that. How to make money in the stock market, how to make money flipping houses, how to make money starting your own business, how to make money blah, 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 how to make money on Amazon, how to make more money on Walmart. All nonsense books that lead to nothing as far as spirituality is concerned. As far as the most important thing, how to liberate yourself from the cycle of birth and death. They just teach you how to stay in the cycle of birth and death. So Prabhupada writes, trying to understand things by one's own direct experience is the material process of gaining knowledge, technically called pratyaksha. The Vedic method is different. It is called shruti, which means to hear from authoritative sources. That is the secret of Vedic understanding. It is a secret, because even if you explain this to someone, they say, oh, I don't understand. Or, no, I don't accept that. It's not scientific. Yeah, scientific. Science is all based on personal experience. With your imperfect senses, you should not try to understand things that are beyond your experimental powers. That eliminates all the scientists. They say, no. We only accept what we can understand through our personal experience and experimentation and measuring things and weighing things and identifying their qualities based on our imperfect senses. No, that's rejected by the Vedas. Can you find out by experimenting? Is it possible? No, Prabhupada says. No, it's not possible. Then how can you know who... Oh, no, so it says, I'm sorry. With your imperfect senses, you should not try to understand things that are beyond your experimental powers. That is not possible. Suppose you want to know who your father is. Can you find out by experimenting? Is it possible? No. Then how can you know who your father is? Now, see, someone would say, oh, wait a minute, that might have been true, 20 years ago, but now we have, analysis of DNA and RNA and this and that, and, we can tell who the father is. Well, wait a minute. If the mother doesn't tell you who she was with, or if the woman doesn't tell you who she was with, and if she says, I don't even know myself, now how are you going to find? You would have to analyze every person. Well, you would first say, well, tell us, who you were with. And she said, I don't remember who I was with. There were so many people I don't remember. So then how would they find out? They'd have to start analyzing every person. They'd say, well, who did you go to high school with? Let me see your high school picture. And then they would look at all the boys in the pictures. Well, and then they would have to start there. They would have to do a whole whole investigation of this person, every person she had ever been with, right? And still, it's not sure. They would find out. See. So it says here, with your imperfect senses, you should not try to understand things that are beyond your experimental powers. That is not possible. Suppose you want to know who your father is. Can you find out by experimenting? Is it possible? No. Then how can you know who your father is? By hearing from the proper authority, your mother. This is common sense. And if you cannot know your material father by the experimental process, how can you know the Supreme Father by the experimental process? Brilliant example by Prabhupada. Brilliant example. If you can't even know who your father is by experimenting, how are you going to know who Krishna is by experimenting? Right? Krishna is the original father. He's the father of the father of the father, all the way down to you. So if you cannot understand your immediate father, the previous generation, by the experimental process, how can you know God or Krishna in this way? People search for God by the experimental process. But after much searching, they fail. Then they say, oh, there is no God. I am God. But the Ishopanishad says that one should try to learn about God not by the experimental process, but by hearing. From whom should one hear? From a shopkeeper? From fanatics? No. One should hear from those who are dhira. Dhira means one whose senses are not agitated by material influence. This is really precious knowledge. That's proving that. This is proving that there's no knowledge in these schools. They're just teaching ignorance. And the more kids are subjected to that ignorance, the farther away they go from Krishna. Anything that leads us away from Krishna is Maya. Anything that leads us away from Krishna. Anything that speaks about knowledge that has nothing to do with Krishna is Maya. Let's see. So, then it says, dhira means one whose senses are not agitated by material influence. There are different kinds of agitation. Agitations of the mind, the power of speech, and anger, and agitations of the tongue, the belly, and the genitals. When we become angry, we forget everything and can do any nonsense and speak so much nonsense. For the agitation of the tongue, there are so many advertisements. Here is liquor. Here is chicken. Here is beef. Will we die without liquor, chicken, or beef? No. For the human beings, Krishna has given so many nice things to eat: grains, fruits, milk, and so on. You'll be surprised at how many Hindus eat meat. It's unbelievable. It's completely against their dharma, but yet they do it. And yesterday I was talking to volunteers at the farm, and they were telling me, said even in the villages, the brahmanas eat meat now. Even in the villages, where normally everybody knows everybody, right? He said they're also eating meat now, the brahmanas. This is crazy. It has nothing to do with Vedic Dharma. But yet, they're doing it. So, then it says, the cow produces milk abundantly, not for herself, but for human beings. That is proper human food. God says, Mrs. Cow, although you are producing milk, you cannot drink it. It is for the human beings who are more advanced than animals. Of course, in the infant stage, animals live off their mother's milk. So the calves drink some of the cow's milk, but the cow gives excess milk, and that excess is specifically meant for us. Wow. We should accept whatever God has ordained. Nowadays, kids go to school, and before they go to school, they're drinking milk, right? Then they go to school, and one day they come home and say, "Oh, Mom, I'm a vegan. I don't want to drink any milk anymore, and no dairy, and no butter and no cheese, and you can make cheese out of almond milk and vegetable milk. I can drink vegetable milk, but not real milk." So, so they are being that's what they learn in school nowadays, to become a vegan, right? And even when we go in Sankirtan, yesterday at the food truck, a very nice couple came and they said, "We're vegan. Do you have anything vegan for us?" I said, "Yes, we do." "Did you really?" "Yes." So everything is vegan here. Of course, I was somewhat lying, but almost everything was vegan except the ghee on the roti. But I gave it to him anyway. That's our secret weapon, the ghee. So anyway, you see, by the way, anyone who becomes a vegan, they become very yin. There's yin and yang in Chinese medicine. Yin means that you're very ephemeral and you have flights of emotion, and you're not really grounded. So most vegans become very yin, and they're easily influenced. They fly off to different flights of speculation, and they're flaky in their determination for spiritual life, not for nonsense, but for spiritual life. That's opposed to yang, which means you're very grounded, heavy duty follower of principles or whatever. So veganism will make a person very yin, and eventually, if they keep it up, they become angry easily because they're not able to control their mind and senses, because they're not say the Chinese medicine, you have to balance yin and yang. You have to be balanced. Not too much this way and not too much that way, right in the middle. But so that is good for health, sustained health. But if you go too far one way or too far the other way, you'll have problems. So it says here, we should accept whatever God has ordained as our proper food. Well, he's ordained it in the Bhagavad Gita. Patram pushpam phalam toyam yomi bhakta prayachati tadaham bhakti paratam asnami prayatatmanaham. Offer me love and devotion, a leaf, water, fruit, and flower, and I will accept it. So he's ordained it. And then in the purport, Prabhupada expands that into its full meaning, such as grains, lentils, and milk products, and also fruits and nuts and so forth. These are meant for human consumption. And he says, even though human beings have two canines, those are specifically for eating meat, but when there's a plethora, or when there's plenty of grains and fruits and nuts and milk and natural sugars like jaggery and so forth, there's no necessity of eating meat. Okay. Then it says, we should accept whatever God has ordained as our proper food. But no, because of agitation of the tongue, we think, why should I be satisfied eating grains, milk products, and vegetables and fruits? Let me maintain a slaughterhouse and kill these cows after drinking their milk. Just as I drank my mother's milk, let me kill them to satisfy my tongue. Ah, that's a quote, right? You shouldn't think such nonsense, but should hear from the dhiras or swamis who have controlled their senses. A swami or goswami is one who has control over the 6 agitations: the speech, the mind, anger, the tongue, the belly, and the genitals. There is a nice poem by Kalidasa called Kumara Sambhava, describing how Lord Shiva is Dhira. When Lord Shiva's wife, Sati, heard Shiva being blasphemed at a sacrifice performed by her father, and her father was Daksha, she committed suicide. Upon hearing about his wife's suicide, Lord Shiva became very angry and left this planet to meditate elsewhere. During that time, there was a war between the demons and the demigods. The demigods needed a good general. They concluded that if Lord Shiva were to beget a son, the son would be able to lead them in the fight against the demons. Lord Shiva was completely naked while meditating. So Parvati, the incarnation of Sati, was sent to agitate his genitals for sex. But he was not agitated. He remained silent. At this point, Kalidas remarks, here is a real Dhira. He is naked, and a young girl is touching his genitals, but still he is not agitated. Dhira means that even if there is some cause for agitation, one will not be agitated. If there is some very nice food, my tongue should not be agitated to taste it. If there is a very nice girl or boy, still I should not be agitated sexually. In this way, one who is Dhira is able to control the 6 agitating forces mentioned above. It is not that Lord Shiva was impotent. He was Dhira. Similarly, Krishna danced with so many girls, but there was no sex appetite. So anyone who claims, Krishna, has so many wives and is dancing with other people's wives, he's really a lecherous person. No. They don't understand the spiritual world. They don't understand the nature of transcendental love and devotion for Krishna. So they interpret everything based on their own experience. But what did Prabhupada say? One should not try and learn based on personal experience, because we have 4 defects. We make mistakes, we're easily illusioned, our senses are imperfect or limited, and we have a cheating propensity. So if we base everything on our personal experience, we're going to make a lot of mistakes. We might get some things right, but we'll get a lot of things wrong. And if you're trying to understand transcendental life through personal experience, you won't understand anything. That's why the scientists don't even try. They just write it off. They say, well, we're not interested in, what your Vedas say, because we can't measure those things. We have to be able to measure those things for it to be science. So they reject 3/4 of reality. And they just stay, and even the 1/4 that they're looking at, they don't really understand that much. So Like, for example, how are they going to reach the far reaches of the universe when it takes 40 million light years to get there, right? They can't even go to the moon. How are they going to go to all these other planets and examine what's going on there with their robots and their machines and their different types of diagnostic equipment? How are they going to do that? They can't even. They don't even know. They haven't really done a full examination of the Earth. There's still many parts of the Earth they have not really examined. And they've only gone about 4 or 5, maybe 6 miles into the crust of the Earth, maybe 10 miles maximum, not even. And they've only gone with their space station 400 miles into space. So what are they going to understand? They haven't even examined thoroughly this planet. Okay. But they're saying, oh, well, we've ruined this planet. You know, we have to go to other planets, right? And after we ruin all the planets in this universe, we have to go to other universes, right? This is all nonsense. It's all crazy talk. Okay. So, therefore, it says, Dhira means even if there is some cause for agitation, one will not be agitated. If there is some very nice food, my tongue should not be agitated to taste it. If there is a very nice girl or boy, still I should not be agitated sexually. In this way, one who is Dhira is able to control the 6 agitating forces mentioned above. It is not that Lord Shiva was impotent. He was Dhira. Similarly, Krishna danced with so many girls, but there was no sex appetite. So you have to hear from a person who is Dhira. If you hear from the Adhira, or those who are not self-controlled, then whatever knowledge you learn will be useless. There it is, right there. It'll be useless. In the Ishopanishad, a student has approached his spiritual master to inquire from him, and the spiritual master is saying, this is what I have heard from authoritative sources. The spiritual master is not inventing something from his own experience. He is presenting exactly what he has heard. So we have nothing to research. This is another big thing that Prabhupada has been saying for a long time. When he started the Bhaktivedanta Institute, he told the scientists there, you don't need to do any seminal research. They've already done the research. You just have to know how to interpret it correctly. See? And he's right. What most of the works Einstein did, he did not do much of his own research. He took what was already done by Newton and Faraday and by Maxwell, those 3. He had a picture of those 3 previous scientists in his room in Yale University, Princeton University. So he basically worked from their work and gave it a more, let's say, gave a new, let's say, interpretation when he came up with the general theory of relativity. But after that, when he tried to do his own seminal research and trying to formulate the unified field theory, he failed. He was not able to do it. Why could he not do it? Why up until today they haven't been able to do it, and why even in the future they will not be able to do it? Because they're only dealing with a small part of reality. They're completely rejecting the spiritual world. So how will they have an equation that explains everything? They won't. Okay, so then Prabhupada says, whatever knowledge you learn will be useless. In the Ishopanishad, a student has approached the spiritual master to inquire from him, and the spiritual master is saying, this is what I have heard from authoritative sources. The spiritual master is not inventing something from his own experience. He is presenting exactly what he has heard. So we have nothing to research. Everything is there. We simply have to hear from a person who is Dhira, who is not agitated by the 6 urges. That is the Vedic process of gaining knowledge. And if we try to use some other process, we will remain covered by nescience or ignorance. Wow. The Ishopanishad states, only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Okay, so Ishopanishad, verse number what? 10. Let's see what that is. Or 11, let's see. 1 second. Yeah, 11. Vidyam chayas vidobhayam saha vidyaya militum trutva vidyayam ritam asnute. One who can learn the process of ignorance and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So let's not misinterpret what this verse is saying. It's not saying, it just said that we have to learn ignorance side by side with knowledge. So I have to go to school. I have to go to school to learn ignorance. No, you don't. Because if you read Prabhupada's books, you'll see that he gives the truth and he gives the opposite, explaining what is untruth in his books. So the best way to learn Ajnana is to hear it from Prabhupada, not to hear it from the nonsense people, because they'll present it as the truth. Prabhupada's presenting it as it actually is. It's false. So in the purport, what does it say? It says, the path of Vidya is most perfectly presented in Srimad Bhagavatam, so the path of knowledge, which directs a human being to utilize his life to inquire about the absolute truth. Utilize his life, not to inquire about what is false, not to learn what is false, thinking that you'll make money by doing it. You might make some money. Bezos has made a lot of money. But what has that money done for him? Put him deeper into illusion. Dumping one wife and marrying somebody else's wife. Is that knowledge? That's ignorance, right? Investing $2 billion to solve the riddle of death, that is ignorance. You can't. That's the law of nature. You cannot overcome death. None of us can overcome death. So he's just acting like a fool. The absolute truth is realized step by step as Brahman, Paramatma, and finally Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. The absolute truth is realized by the broad-minded man who has attained knowledge and detachment by following the 18 principles of the Bhagavad Gita described in the purport to Mantra 10. So he's talking about Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, 8th to 11th verse. The central purpose of these 18 principles is the attainment of transcendental devotional service to the personality of Godhead. Therefore, all classes of men are encouraged to learn the art of devotional service to the Lord. The guaranteed path to the aim of Vidya, or knowledge, is described by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which we have presented in English as the nectar of devotion. The culture of Vidya is summarized in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.14 in the following words. Tasmat ekana bharata, tasmat ekana manaso, Bhagavat Satvatam pati, Shrotavya kirtitavyascha, deyak pujascha nityada. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, and remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Unless religion, economic development, and sense gratification aim toward the attainment of devotional service to the Lord, they are all simply different forms of ignorance, as Sri Upanishad indicates in the following mantra. Okay, so Tasmat Ikanamana. So Bhagavat Satvatam Pati Shotavya Kirtitavya Deya Pujaschа Nityada. Therefore, with one pointed attention, in other words, what does that mean, one pointed attention? Don't waste your time doing anything else. Just focus on this one thing. What is that? One should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Now, if you heard this when you were 5 years old, and you kept hearing it until you were 16 years old, and you actually did it, you could probably spend the rest of your life doing this. But if you hear it only when you're 20 or 25 or 30 or 35, it's going to be very hard to do it because you've already become entangled. So, better late than never, right? So now, the whole idea is how to get disentangled, and that's going to be a gradual process. But it's definitely going to happen. It happens in two ways. It happens naturally, because as children grow up, they leave their family, they start their own families, and companies go bankrupt, and there's war, and there's economic upturn, economic downturn. It's going to happen naturally anyway. But if you plan for it and do it in a very, let's say, enlightened way, you'll end up 100% doing this. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. You will do it. It'll happen naturally if you understand that this is actually the purpose or goal of life. The goal of life is not to continue in the cycle of birth and death. We already have gone through the whole cycle of birth and death at least 8,400,000 times. So why continue it anymore when you have a chance to get out of it? And the reward is so great that the process requires tremendous patience and diligence. Patience and diligence. Right? So, how many years did Brahma meditate in order to see Krishna face to face? Very long time. See? So, therefore, but we're in a different situation. We weren't born before the material creation, when there was just darkness, right? And there was nothing other than Brahma. So we're born, and there are temples with deities and worship going on, and books and tapes and videos, and all these ways of assimilating and adapting to 24 hours a day Krishna consciousness. So this is different. Brahma had to meditate hundreds and millions of years before he was able to see Krishna. All you have to do is just walk through the door at 1420 228th Avenue, and you'll see Krishna. You'll see Radha and Krishna, right? Sita and Ram, and Lakshmi Narayana, and Gaur Nitai, and so forth. So it's different today. And this process that Lord Chaitanya has given is very simple. Anyone can do it. He recommended 5 things. Associate with devotees, real devotees, not the ones that are sometimes in the program, sometimes not in the program, sometimes doing devotional service, sometimes not doing devotional service, sometimes up early, sometimes not up early. You want to associate with devotees who are strictly following the process of Krishna consciousness and with the rules and regulations, and who are really into hearing and chanting, Shravanam Kirtanam, and then that leads to Shravanam, remembering the Lord. So, Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Everyone can attain this situation. Everyone. It's just a matter of knowing what is the purpose of life, and how to organize yourself to attain that purpose. That's the whole point of the temple. Is to help people make that transition from all day long Maya to all day long Krishna consciousness. Now, it's a slow transition, especially after one has become entangled. But if you're determined, you can do it. And everyone can do it. No one is barred. Okay. So therefore, what time is it now? Okay, so we'll stop right there. There's a lot more to say about this. Good. Haribol. Are there any questions? Any questions? Any questions, Dhananjaya? Huh? No online questions? Oh, here comes Dhananjaya.
I don't see anything.
Oh, okay. You have a question?
We've had multiple different mantras and stuff we say before classes. To help me understand the mood, what are we accomplishing when we're reciting these? Not just the Brahma Samhita, but we did parts of the Bhagavatam from like the 7.1 in the Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita. Are we accomplishing, are we setting a mood when we do these mantras in the beginning of class?
Well, you remember what we said about Gajendra? What do we say about Gajendra?
He was able to remember the a mantra or a prayer because he had memorized it from before.
And he was in the body of an animal, but
Exactly.
still he was able to remember. So that's why we're chanting these mantras. We don't want you to have a body of an animal, but if you do have one, you'll still be able to remember a mantra that you were chanting before, or mantras that you were chanting before in the human form of life.
Okay, so whichever one we're doing is not as important as we're remembering important mantras and prayers.
Yeah, well, the mantras, Prabhupada recommended 3. He said the Hare Krishna mantra, the Stringa mantra, and the Brahma Samhita, in that purport.
Okay.
He mentioned those 3 specifically. So we are, we're chanting Hare Krishna. We chanted the Stringa mantra, and we're also chanting Brahma Samhita.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Follow Prabhupada, you won't get lost. Follow your own mind, you'll be lost almost immediately. Any other questions? Vidya Prabhu looks like he's got a question that's coming up, right? Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll have, who would like to chant the Guru, she chanted yesterday. Guru Puja.
Sri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma.
Shri Guru Charana Padma
Kevala Bhakti Sadma. Bandhu Moi Savadana Mate.
Bandhu Moi Savadana Mate.
Jahara Prasade Bhai Ye Bhavadoriya Jai.
Janara Prasade
Bhavadoriya Jai. Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoy De.
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoyde.
Guru Mukha Padma Vagya Chitte Te Goriya Gya.
Guru Mukha Padma Vagya Chitte Te Goriya Gya.
Arna Gori Ho Mane Aja.
Arna Goriya Maneya Sa.
Sri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati.
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati.
Jai Prasade Pure Sarvasha.
Ye Prasade Pure Sarvasa.
Jai Prasade Pure Sarvasha.
Ye Prasade Pure Sarvasa.
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से.
चक्षुदान दिला जय जन्मे प्रभु से.
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो.
दिव्य ज्ञान दे प्रकाशित.
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ हो दे अविद्या विनाश जाते.
भक्ति जहाँ अविद्या विनाश जाते.
वेदे गाय जहाँ राचारितो.
वेदे गाय जन रचयित.
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनरा बंधु.
गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदन जनर बंधु.
लोके नाथ लोके राजीवाना.
लोके नाथ लोके राजीवाना.
लोके नाथ लोके राजीवाना. हाँ प्रभु गुरु दो या दो है मोरे बाधा चाया. गुरु दो या देव मोरे बाधा चा. हे मेजाज गुसुग्रीभुवाना. गुसुग्रीभुवाना. हाँ प्रभु गुरु दो या देव मोरे बाधा चाया.
प्रभु गुरु दया देह मोरे बाधा चाया.
हे बेजाज गुसुग्रीभुवाना. जय प्रभुपाद पतित पावना. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada.
Sri Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine
Namo
Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desadarine
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desadarine.
Jayo Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayo Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajakaccha Statara Satara Shri Shrimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Shikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Dvaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Samakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapuri Dham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Tulasi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Ganga Maya ki jai. Jamuna Maya ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Thai Gaur all glories to the assembled Buddhas. All glories to assembled Buddhas. All glories to assembled Buddhas. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavana ki jai. Vishesa Sunyavadi Paskati Satar. Guru Premanandi Haribol. The lotus of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord Blessed. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, and the friend of the poor, and Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gurudev. Prabhupada says that one should not try and understand things by personal experience. It's an amazing statement. So, this is an example of what happens if you try to understand things by personal experience. So, in the 17th century, there was a experimentalist, Francesco Redi, 1626 to 1697. He lived. He lived 61 years. So one of the most notable scientists who objected to the idea of abiogenesis. So abiogenesis means that life is produced in some mysterious way from matter. Right? And the example was given that if you take a piece of meat and you leave it in an open place, eventually maggots will grow from it. And then the maggots turn into some kind of a fly or butterfly. So they said, this is proof that matter produces living beings. Well, Mr. Reddy was ready to disprove that. And he says, so what did he do? He thought that maggots did not spontaneously generate, but instead arose from eggs that were laid by flies. In the year 1688, that would be like 9 years before he died, Reddy produced results that proved his idea to be true. He put meat in jars, some of which were left open and some of which were sealed. As Reddy predicted, the maggots were only found on the meat that the flies could reach. However, Reddy's first experiment was not enough proof for everyone. Some people argued that the experiment was flawed, claiming that air was a requirement for abiogenesis to occur. Reddy then changed his experiment and added a third group of jars that had netting, like medical gauze, on top. Flies tried to get to the meat, but could not. Instead, they laid their eggs on the gauze, and the maggots formed there. Reddy proved that maggots did not come from non-living chemicals, like in a piece of meat. Instead, the maggots came from flies, and the maggots grew to be flies also. This established the fact that life comes only from life of its own kind in nature. Many people, however, were still convinced that life could pop into existence from non-living chemicals, and the theory of abiogenesis survived for many more years. So biogenesis means life comes from life. Abiogenesis means life comes from dead things, like matter. In the 1860s, however, a man named Louis Pasteur changed that and laid the false theory of abiogenesis to rest once and for all. Pasteur did a series of experiments in which he placed broth, a mixture of water and hay, or water and meat, in glass flasks. The flasks had special S-curved necks designed so that air could reach the broth, but any tiny organisms would get caught in the crook of the S-shaped curve. The flask made it impossible for any particles in the air to reach the broth. Some of the flasks were observed for an entire year, and no life forms grew in the broth. When Pasteur broke the necks off the flasks, allowing particles to reach the broth, then organisms grew in the broth. Pasteur had done it. He had proved that the organisms growing in the broth came from other organisms in the air. They did not form from lifeless chemicals. Finally, the false theory of abiogenesis was dead. Since the days of Louis Pasteur, the law of biogenesis has been recognized as the most fundamental law in all sciences that deal with life. So yeah, if you want to get more revive or reinvigorate tissue in your body, they can do it. They use stem cells to do it. Like, let's say your ligaments are degenerated and you can hardly walk. Well, they can inject these stem cells that they get from living bodies, and it can grow more ligament. But life comes from life. It doesn't come from dead things, right? Okay, so this is one of the law of biogenesis has been recognized as the most fundamental law in all sciences that deal with life. However, this leaves atheists in an awkward position. If life cannot arise from non-life, how did it get here? This has led atheists to believe in many unscientific and false theories. The most common atheistic response today is that spontaneous generation is not possible now, but it must have been possible in the distant past. Many have tried to prove this by performing experiments to create life, yet every single one has failed. In the end, if we look at all the available evidence, there is only one conclusion that fits. In nature, life comes from previous life of its own kind. The idea of abiogenesis has always been wrong, and this shows us that there is a God, and atheism simply cannot be true. If you look at a carton of milk or a bottle of juice, you will read that it has been pasteurized. That means that it was heated up to a high enough temperature to kill the bacteria in it. Then, before any air could hit it, the carton or bottle was sealed so that bacteria could not grow in the juice or milk until the container is opened. This process was invented by Louis Pasteur. Now, in comparison to that, this is an article from 2015. How can life emerge from non-living matter? UNC, University of Northern Colorado, Carolina, yeah. Scientists find new evidence. Researchers say new findings could help, notice, could help answer questions about life's chemical origins. By Joseph Dussault, staff writer. It's 2015. A recipe for the perfect life-yielding primordial soup has eluded. It's not made by Campbell's Soup, by the way. Yeah. Primordial soup has eluded science for decades. In other words, they're trying to make this fantasized primordial soup that they claim existed in the past. But a team of biochemists say they now have a key ingredient. They didn't say they made the primordial soup. They have a key ingredient. Charles Carter and Richard Wolfenden, both of the University of Northern Carolina, have uncovered new evidence of abiogenesis. Oh, yeah? New evidence? Wait a minute, not so fast. The process by which life arises from non-living chemical matter. This is the dream of every atheist, right? Their study, published Thursday in the Journal of Biological Chemistry, suggests, right, that a single ancient gene may have used each of its opposite DNA strands to code for different chemical catalysts. Those separate catalysts would have both activated amino acids, which then form proteins essential to the production of living cells. There's a lot of ifs in that sentence. Where does life come from? Despite years of research, scientists still rack their brains over this most existential question, meaning they failed. Right? If the universe did begin with a rapid expansion, as by the Big Bang Theory, then life as we know it sprung from non-living matter. How this process, known as abiogenesis, could have occurred is a source of much scientific debate. In other words, they're still guessing. They haven't been able to do it. In the early 20th century, the primeval soup model of abiogenesis started to gain traction. It proposes that in Earth's prebiotic history, simple organic matter was exposed to energy in the form of volcanoes and electrical storms. That energy would have catalyzed chemical reactions that, in the span of a few 100 million years, could have produced self-replicating molecules. Whoa, a lot of ifs there also. Right. In 1952, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey tested that hypothesis. They combined water, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen in sealed vials in an attempt to replicate Earth's original atmosphere. They bombarded the vials with heat and continuous electrode sparks to stimulate volcanic activity and lightning. Eventually, the reaction produced a number of amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, and by extension, life itself. Whoa, wait a minute. By extension, what does that mean? We'll find out now. Today, the Miller-Urey experiment, which was done back in 1952, right? So it's fast forward now. This is 70 years later, right? Today, the Miller-Urey experiment is contested. In other words, there's opposite opinions for a number of reasons, including the possibility that the Earth's original atmosphere may have had a different composition. So they're throwing may-haves to the may-have theory, right? Still, the production of organic compounds from inorganic precursors laid a strong foundation for the primordial soup hypothesis, and new findings support that hypothesis. Dr. Carter says, our work furnishes a likely explanation for how nature overcame one of the main obstacles in turning the building blocks demonstrated by Miller into genetic coding and inheritance. Carter explains. The obstacle Carter refers to is the fact that certain chemical reactions essential to spontaneous protein assembly. In other words, they make these big words, in a spontaneous protein assembly. Assembly means put together, right? Occur very slowly. Unless they are sped up and regulated, the prospect of life becomes all but impossible. In modern living cells, that reaction is catalyzed by enzymes called aminoactyl-tRNA syntheses. These complex molecules belong to two separate families or classes. Class 1 syntheses activate 10 of the 20 amino acids that form proteins, and Class 2 syntheses activate the other 10. In their experiments, Carter and colleagues took modern syntheses and stripped away all but their essential and universal components. They found that the remaining structure, which they called urzimes, were actually furnishing, they found that the remaining structure, which they called urzimes, were actually functional. These urzimes probably resemble the ancestral molecules which eventually gave way to life, Carter says. A lot of ifs again. We discovered urzimes within the elaborate modern aminolacto tRNA syntheses by ignoring all the bells and whistles created by evolution, Carter says. We showed that what was left was fully capable of translating the code. What code is he talking about? DNA, RNA, whatever. According to Carter, the genetic code itself is strangely organized. One coding strand forms the outer surface of the protein, while the other forms the core. In other words, the two strands rely on inside-out interpretations of the same genetic information. We devised a way to show experimentally that the two families are related to each other, despite all evidence to the contrary. Carter says, our experiment shows that the ancestral Class 2 protozeme was built from exactly the same blueprint as the ancestral Class 1 protozeme, only the blueprint behaved as if it were written on glass and interpreted from the opposite side. The stunning thing that both interpretations work equally well in the first test. In other words, nature solved the protein production problem by evolving a single gene to do two separate jobs. And while Carter and Dr. Wolfenden's study leaves many questions unanswered, it does provide a new set of tools with which to move forward. Carter says his work could inform new experiments to fill the gaps in the prebiotic chemistry, so before life chemistry. Existential implications aside, there is another motivation for answering the abiogenesis question. If we fully understand which materials and conditions are necessary to the production of life, we can narrow our search for life elsewhere in the cosmos. In other words, a primordial soup recipe could revolutionize the study of astrobiology. Carter, however, isn't as interested in his work's extraterrestrial applications. I find myself an inveterate terrestrial chauvinist, Carter says. In other words, he says he's not interested in going to other planets. He likes the Earth. I believe that life as we know it involves so many enchanting coincidences that it is both unique and inevitable, given appropriate environments. My point of view is probably an outlier, but it is based on my life trying to understand what makes biochemistry tick and discovering just how well suited so many of nature's choices really are. Well, translation into plain English, we failed again to prove abiogenesis. But maybe somebody else can use some of the things we found, and maybe they can put things together. You know,
just keep delaying the
yeah, they're kicking the bucket down the road, as they say. So you see, this is all nonsense. This is all complete nonsense. It's already proven that abiogenesis doesn't work. But no, they have to try and do the impossible and prove that it does work. It's already a law of nature that everyone is going to die naturally. But yet, Bezos is betting $2 billion that they'll find a cure for death. This is all nonsense stuff. They're bluffing, right? And people are believing the bluff and prolonging their stay in the cycle of birth and death by doing that. You see, the whole thing is cheating. But if you're a cheater, you can be cheated. If you're not a cheater and you're a Dira, you cannot be cheated. Haribol. Yes. Oh yeah, the homework is to actually write down what the process of vidya, or accumulating real knowledge, is. Okay, now your references are 1.5.34, Mantra 11 of the Ishopanishad. And one second. Yeah, and then in laws of nature, the laws of nature and infallible justice, this book, this section called The Way of Knowing God. That goes on for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages. Okay?
The last one, Maharaj, which book is that?
The Laws of Nature. Okay, it's basically on page from 27 to 32. These are all lectures that Prabhupada gave on the Ishopanishad in 1972. So this is the way to have real knowledge, not all this fake nonsense. Maybe, perhaps, could, maybe. There is a possibility, and all those nonsense terms. Haribol. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. The question is there in the material world? It's monumental. It's unbelievable how much cheating and misleading, so-called knowledge is. I mean, Prabhupada says they are just bluffing. just bluffing.
What is the bluffing? Are they also in illusion? They're probably in illusion too. Right?
Well, yeah, they're under the illusion. Like Bezos, if he invests $2 billion in a company that's going to solve the riddle of death, I mean, that's illusion when it's impossible to do. But they'll say, "Well, we just found this, and then that'll lead to this other thing we think in the future, and maybe in the future, then we'll know." That's nonsense. They'll never know. They've been trying to figure out how to surpass death for the last right from the beginning of time, and they haven't found out. So how are these guys going to find out? There were much greater intellectuals before in the previous ages.